So you've watched my videos on worry management and you've learned a lot of skills and tools to help you better manage the worry, but you're not quite sure about when or how to use the various tools. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the perfect recipe for dealing with your worries. Hi everyone. In today's video, what I want to do is talk about a recipe or a formula for putting together all of the worry management tools that we've been talking about into a framework that you can use to best manage your worries when they come up. But before I get into that, I just want to go over a couple of disclaimers. I am a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a replacement or substitute for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. Now, with those two things out of the way, let's start talking about how to put these worry management tools together, the recipe for perfect worry management. So if you've watched the previous videos in this series on worry management, you know that we've talked about a lot of tools and a lot of skills, and our model of worry has gotten a lot more complex. So we started with the basic engine of worry. After that, we added intolerance of uncertainty as the fuel that drives this worry engine. We then talked about worry beliefs and how worry beliefs can perpetuate worries. And we talked about how ineffective problem solving and negative problem orientation can maintain type 1 worries. Most recently, we've talked about how cognitive avoidance, or trying not to think about type 2 worries, can be a major factor in maintaining those type 2 worries and keeping those type 2 worries coming up over and over again. So our model has gotten a lot more complex than where it was when we started. And as we've gone along, we've talked about lots of different tools for managing these various factors that maintain worry. We've talked about worry awareness training and categorizing worries as type 1 or type 2 worries. We've talked about the importance of building tolerance for uncertainty through behavioral experiments with uncertainty. We've talked about ways of challenging worry beliefs. We've talked about improving problem orientation by recognizing problems earlier on, by normalizing the occurrence of problems, and by reframing problems as opportunities instead of threats. We've talked about cognitive exposure and how that can be used to help address and deal with type 2 worries. So we've talked about a whole bunch of skills, a whole bunch of tools. And for a lot of my clients, when we get to this point of therapy, they've learned a lot, but there's a little bit of confusion in terms of, like, all of these skills seem a little bit disconnected, and they don't really understand how they all come together and how to use all of them to effectively manage worry. And that's what I want to talk about in this video, exactly how we put together these tools and skills, the order in which to use them, kind of like a recipe to best manage worry. So the very first step in terms of this worry management recipe goes back to the very first tool we talked about, which is worry awareness training. You have to be aware and you have to know what it is that you're worrying about. And then you categorize the worries. Once you've identified the worry, you think about it and categorize it. Is this a type 1 worry or is this a type 2 worry? So let's start with type 1 worries. What would be the formula or the recipe for dealing with type 1 worries? And as a review, type 1 worries are worries about actual, current, real problems, problems that you're actually experiencing in this moment. So the first step with type 1 worries is you have identified it as a type 1 worry. Well, the next thing to do is to think about, are there any ways in which I'm being intolerant of uncertainty in this situation? Are there various things that I'm doing that may be avoiding or trying to eliminate uncertainty with this problem. So, for example, let's imagine that I have a problem like I've just gotten into an argument with my friend, and me and my friend haven't spoken in a couple of weeks. So, it's a current problem that I'm dealing with. Well, what are some of the ways in which I might be intolerant of uncertainty in this situation? Well, I may be avoiding reaching out to my friend because I'm concerned that they're still upset with me. And so I'm engaging in avoidance. Or I may be checking in with other friends and seeking reassurance about, what I did. Was it wrong? Would they be upset with me? How would they react? Have they heard anything from my friend about it? So thinking about all of the things that I might be doing that are intolerant of uncertainty, and thinking about what is the opposite that I could be doing. What are things that I can be doing to tolerate uncertainty in that situation? So that's the step. Looking for opportunities to be more tolerant of uncertainty, or to be tolerant of uncertainty with this problem. After that, after I've worked on tolerating uncertainty, the next thing I want to do is to think about which of the worry beliefs might be playing a role in this worry. So I might hold some worry beliefs that maybe me worrying about my relationship with my friend, it demonstrates that I'm caring. It demonstrates that I'm conscientious. It demonstrates that I'm a responsible person who cares about his relationships. That's why I'm worrying about it. So once I've identified that worry belief that's continuing to have me worry about this, I can begin to challenge that worry belief using some of those challenging questions I talked about in a previous video. So I've engaged in trying to tolerate uncertainty. I've identified and challenged my worry beliefs. The next step is to deal with that negative problem orientation. So recognizing the problem earlier on, well, I've identified the worry, so that's good. Now I want to normalize that problems are normal. It's not that there's something wrong with me that I'm having this problem with my friend. It's that these things kind of happen. And then I want to try and reframe this problem as an opportunity. So I can look at this as this is terrible. Me and my friend are never going to get back together. If I try to reach out to my friend, they're going to be really upset with me, and it's going to lead to an even worse outcome. So I'm thinking about all of the threat associated with this worry. But the goal here is for me to try to reframe that as what's the opportunity or the challenge here. Well, maybe the opportunity in this is for me and my friend to be able to work out this problem. And by doing so, we actually get closer because we've gone through it, we've worked out our difficulties, and now we're at a better place than we were even before the problem came up. So then I can engage in the problem solving steps because I've I've identified the problem, I've reframed it, I've normalized it, that negative problem orientation is out of the way, and now I can actually engage in some of those problem solving steps that we talked about in a previous video. So identifying the problem, identifying the goal, brainstorming possible solutions of how I can fix this relationship with my friend, evaluating those possible solutions and picking one, developing a plan for what I'm going to do, and actually utilizing the plan or implementing the plan, and then seeing whether or not it's helped, seeing whether or not me and my friend have resolved our difficulties. So that if I do all of those things and if I solve the problem at the end, I'm no longer going to be worrying about this issue. So that's the recipe for how you deal with type 1 worries. You identify it and label it as a type 1 worry. You look for tolerating uncertainty opportunities as a type 1 worry. You challenge the worry beliefs that are contributing to this type 1 worry. You address the negative problem orientation, and you engage in problem solving. So it's actually pretty similar to the order in which I presented these tools as we were going through the videos. And that was for a reason, because that's kind of the order in which you want to use these tools. So that's a type 1 worry. Well, how do you deal with type 2 worries? Well, if you remember, type 2 worries are worries about future or potential problems. Problems that haven't happened yet, problems that may never happen. And so what's the approach for dealing with these type 2 worries? Well, the first few steps are actually identical for dealing with type 1 worries. So you've identified the worry, you've labeled it as a type 2 worry. The first thing to do is to look for opportunities to tolerate uncertainty. So for example, if my type 2 worry is I've planned my one vacation a year to be a sunny, warm weather destination vacation, and I'm starting to worry about the weather, and that the weather is going to be terrible, and that it's going to rain the whole time, and my vacation is going to be ruined. And this is something that really sort of bothers me, or is really concerning for me, and that I'm worrying about it a lot. Well, thinking about what are some of the things that I might be doing to be more, what are some of the things that I could do to be more tolerant of uncertainty in this situation? Well, maybe I shouldn't be checking the weather and the weather forecast for my hot weather destination. Maybe I shouldn't be checking the Farmer's Almanac to see historically what the weather was like at that destination over the time that I'm going to be traveling there. Maybe I shouldn't be looking into all of the possible things I could do if the weather is not great, or if it is raining the whole time. Because those are all things that are designed to eliminate uncertainty. And so what I want to do is to try to be just more tolerant of uncertainty in this situation and not do those intolerant of uncertainty behaviors. So once I've worked through the things that I can do to be more tolerant of uncertainty, I may want to challenge some of the beliefs about the usefulness of this worry. So maybe I hold a belief that worrying about this means that I'm kind of preparing myself, so that if I worry about it ahead of time, if when I get to my vacation it is raining, I'll kind of have prepared myself emotionally for it, and so I won't be so upset. Well, identifying that worry belief and challenging that worry belief, as we talked about in the challenging worry beliefs video. So now I've gone through, I'm tolerating uncertainty, I've identified and challenged the worry beliefs. The next step I want to do, if I'm still worrying about this, is to engage in that cognitive exposure exercise that I talked about, which is essentially to write out a script, imagining that worst case scenario, imagining that I end up on this vacation and it's pouring the whole time, and imagining how bad it would be to its very end. And then reviewing that script over and over and over again to essentially drain the emotion out of it. So that's the process for type 2 worries. And if you notice, the first few steps are identical to the steps in type 1 worries. All that differs is what you do at the end, whether it's cognitive exposure or whether or not it's problem solving. So those are the recipes. That's the order in which you want to use these tools. And that's how these tools sort of fit together to work together for the most effective worry management. Now, one of the things that can come up is sometimes my clients will say, okay, I understand this, and I understand it makes sense what I do with type 1 worries. It makes sense what I do with type 2 worries. But what if I make a mistake at that very first step? What if I label a type 1 worry as a type 2 worry? So for example, it's a worry about an actual problem, but I mislabel it as a type 2 worry. So I think it's a worry about a future or potential problem. Well, whenever clients bring this up, I say, okay, well, let's walk through what would happen then. Well, so it's a type 1 worry in actuality, but I imagine it a type 2 worry. So what I'm going to do with dealing with a type 2 worry is I'm going to be tolerating uncertainty. Well, I'd be doing that for a type 1 worry anyway. I'd be identifying and challenging worry beliefs. Well, be doing that for a type 1 worry anyway. Then I'd engage in cognitive exposure. So I would write out a script and start working on a script about the worst case scenario that I can imagine in this. Well, that wouldn't really work for a type 1 worry because a type 1 worry is about an actual problem. But what will happen, and this has happened with some of my clients before, is they start working on a worry script and they start reviewing the worry script. And what they find is that they start to get really frustrated because they're reviewing a worry script about something they have control over. And then once they identify that, no, wait, this is something I have control over, then they can recognize, you know what, this isn't actually a type 2 worry. This is a type 1 worry. And at that point, they then shift to dealing with it in terms of addressing the negative problem orientation and engaging in problem solving. So there's nothing really wrong with misclassifying a type 1 worry as a type 2 worry because once you get to the cognitive exposure part of the recipe, you'll recognize that this cognitive exposure isn't working because I can do something about it. And once I recognize I can do something about it, I can then shift over to addressing it like a type 1 worry. So think about what would happen if it's actually a type 2 worry, but I misclassify it as a type 1 worry. So it's a worry about a future or potential problem, but I deal with it like it's a worry about a current problem. Well, the first few steps are going to be identical. I'm going to be tolerating uncertainty. I'm going to be identifying and challenging worry beliefs. The only difference is now I'm going to start to engage in problem solving, or I'm going to try to engage in problem solving for a problem that doesn't exist. Well, as soon as I start to try and engage in problem solving, I'm going to recognize that the problem doesn't currently exist. And once I'm aware that the problem doesn't currently exist, that's my cue that this is actually a type 2 worry. And so then I can shift to working on a cognitive exposure script if I need to. So the idea here is not to worry about or not to get too preoccupied with having to have it perfectly clear. Is this a type 1 worry? Is this a type 2 worry? Like I said from the very beginning, just do your best. Just sort of do your best to try and figure out if this is type 1 or type 2 and just go with it. Because the process is self-correcting. The first few steps are going to be identical, whether or not it's type 1 or a type 2 worry. And if you misclassify the worries, it's okay because you'll recognize that as soon as you start doing either the cognitive exposure or the problem solving. And you'll recognize that it's not working, which means that you've probably misclassified the worry. And so you just need to shift to whatever tool you need to use for the other type of worry. So I hope all of that makes sense. It's kind of like putting together all of the tools and skills that we've talked about in terms of a recipe or a flow chart, and they really do fit nicely together. And if you address your worries in kind of a systematic way, using these tools in this order, what you'll find is that it's the most effective way of addressing those problematic worries that you're dealing with. So that's it for today's video. I would love to hear your thoughts and views or opinions about this. If you have any questions, please let me know. Please leave some comments in the comments section down below. If you like seeing my videos and would like to see more of them, please hit that subscribe button and that notification bell, and you'll be alerted whenever I post a new video. So that's all for today. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.